The fields are silent. There's no other word for it, no better description of this landscape stretching before you. They are still. They are empty. They are completely buried under a blanket of snow, a thick white blanket that hides everything beneath. And they say nothing. They share no secrets. They tell no stories. Or perhaps they tell stories, but in a language you don't understand, in a language only wintertime can speak, that only frost can utter. The route from Hanover to Göttingen cuts through these fields like a knife through paper, like a ruler across a white surface, and the train travels through with a certainty, a purpose, an understanding of where it's going that the fields don't have, that the fields no longer have now that winter has paralyzed them, now that cold has frozen them. You sit at the window and look out at vastness, endless vastness, at a horizon extending infinitely. The fields stretch endlessly, an infinite white plain so flat it's dizzying. It confuses you. You lose direction. There are no hills, no valleys, no mountains, no variation in this landscape, no differences, only this one thing, this white. Everything is the same. Everything is one. Everything is snow white and boring and absolutely beautiful in its monotony, in its uniformity, in its complete absence of variation. The snow is so deep that the contours of the earth beneath have completely vanished, completely hidden, completely secret. You can't tell whether a river flows under this snow, whether a house stands under this snow, whether under this snow there's simply earth, green earth, black earth, living earth. Everything is mystified. Everything is hidden. Everything is a secret that can't be solved, can't be revealed. Not until the snow melts, not until time passes. The fields are empty. That's the first, the second, and the third thing you see, that your eyes grasp, that your mind processes. They're empty of people, empty of animals, empty of life, empty of every hint of activity or movement or change. In summer, I would imagine, these fields are full of grain or corn or sunflowers or something that grows, that stretches, that reaches for the sky, that yearns for the sun. But now, in this season, now that winter rules, they're empty. They lie fallow. They rest. They sleep. The farmers have brought in their harvest, harvested everything, taken everything away, and now they let their fields sleep. Now they give the soil time to recover, to regenerate, to prepare for the next season, to prepare for next year. That's wise. That's natural. That's the way of things. That's the rhythm of nature. The train cuts a line through this stillness, a black line of movement, an interruption of monotony, a violation of rest. The rails are visible under a thin stripe of snow, two grey lines, two metal rods leading into the distance, in a direction you can't see, because the distance is too far, because the snow devours everything, because the world simply stops existing when it's too far away. The train is a violation of this landscape, but not a harmful one, not an evil one. The train is like a tiny acupuncture needle in a gigantic white body, a tiny point of human activity in a realm of nature, a tiny human attempt to tame nature, to control nature, to use nature. Your compartment is now completely still, utterly quiet, soothing in its silence. Your fellow passengers, if there are any, have fallen asleep, or closed their eyes, or are thinking the same thoughts as you, seeing the same fields, dreaming the same dreams. The only sound is the regular rhythm of the train, the clack-clack of the wheels, the creak of the wooden structures, the whisper of the heating, the breathing of the engine. It's not unpleasant, this sound, but rather soothing. Soothing like medicine, soothing like a lullaby, like the tick-tack of a great clock regulating time, dividing the night into sections, counting the hours. The perspective changes as the train makes a curve, a gentle curve, a soft bend. Suddenly you see the fields from another angle, another direction, another perspective. And they look even larger, even more endless, even stiller, even more complete in their emptiness. It's as if the curve has lifted you higher, as if you're now looking down on this landscape from above, on this world of silence and snow, on this white world that has no colors, that has no differences, that knows only one color. The rail line draws a black line across this white world, a line that says, "Here I am, here I am not alone. I am part of this world, even though I'm different, even though I am motion in a world of stillness, even though I am noise in a world of quiet." Some of these fields have posts in them, fence posts, power poles, markers of human control, signs that this land belongs to someone, that this land has been cultivated, that this land is not wild, that this land is ordered, that this land worked yesterday and will work again tomorrow. But the posts are covered in snow, and they look like gravestones, like markers in a cemetery, like monuments to something that died, like crosses over the graves of hopes. This isn't necessarily a scary thought. It's not frightening. It's simply a thought that imposes itself when you gaze at this empty landscape long enough, when you sit in the train long enough and expose yourself to this silence, when you ask long enough what lies under the snow, what the future brings. Time seems to slow as the train crosses these fields, as the train moves through this white world. Minutes feel like hours, like days, like weeks. Hours feel as if the train is standing in the same place, not moving forward, but sinking into a hypnotic swamp, mixing with the snow, becoming snow itself. This isn't unpleasant. It's actually relaxing. Relaxing in a way that pushes you towards sleep, that draws you, that loosens you, that surrenders you to fatigue. Your window is now completely fogged, covered with a thick layer of condensation, a thick layer of water that has turned to ice. You can't see the fields anymore, only the milky white pattern slowly covering the glass like an illness. You wipe it away, and for a moment you can see out again. But immediately, new fog forms, new condensation, a new barrier between you and the outside world. It's as if the world doesn't want you to see. as if the world forbids you to look, as if the world says, "No, you shouldn't see your window. You should sleep. You should rest. You should ask no more questions." The train sings its song, and the fields answer with silence, with complete silence, with a silence deeper than anything you've ever heard. It's a conversation that repeats endlessly, a dialogue between motion and stillness, between life and rest, between the conscious and the unconscious, between day and night. The snow falls lightly, very lightly, tiny crystals, adding a new layer to the blanket, making the fields even whiter, even stiller, even more silent, even more separated from the world. Your eyes grow heavy, heavier, heavy as lead, heavy as stones. You notice your eyelids beginning to tremble, your gaze beginning to blur, the world beginning to shimmer. The fields are no longer sharply defined, but become a white mist, an abstract idea, a concept of emptiness, a concept of nothing. The train carries you forward, kilometer after kilometer, and the fields glide past you, glide behind you, disappear into the past, become memories, become dreams. Today, a church radio in the compartment. Organ sound, pure and roaring like the wind itself, like 1,000 voices from another world. Someone quickly turns it off, but you still hear the word in your heart, still hear the last note. It's 1930, and you're on the train from Stuttgart to Ludwigsburg. The train smells of new leather and iron steam. Beside you, a man with a bright voice and luminous eyes. The train was full then, full of people all wanting to go somewhere, all with their thoughts. The man beside you wore a clean suit of dark wool cloth and held a hand-packed bag on his lap, very carefully wrapped, as if it contained something infinitely precious, something you could only touch with the greatest care. His face was tilted sideways toward you, but not childishly, rather thoughtfully, rather lost in reflection. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from inner excitement, like someone following a dream. "I've just come from a church," he said, "where I checked a small organ, a wonderful organ, 5 registers, 130 years old, with still the original pipes." He spoke of an organ the way a father speaks of his child, with reverence and tenderness at once. "Do you know what's the highest thing a human can create?" he asked you. You shook your head, because you were curious, because his passion had drawn you. "The organ," he said simply. "To build an organ is to shape God's voice in wood and metal. That's the highest." The man was an organ builder, and he came from Ludwigsburg, where his father, his grandfather, and his great-grandfather had also been organ builders. "My great-grandfather," he said, "built his first organ in 1863. It was for a small chapel near Heilbronn, in the land of Württemberg. The organ still stands. I regulated it myself this year, tuned it, set everything in order." He opened his bag carefully and drew out plans, blueprints, hand-drawn with great care, with wonderful curves and wavy lines showing the wind channels, the pipes, the control mechanisms. "This is the organ I'm building," he said. "A large organ for a new church in Stuttgart. 4 manuals, 16 registers, a total length of 9 meters, with 1,000 liters of wind capacity." He pointed to the plans with fingers that trembled with passion and pride. The brass lamp above the train swung in its holder. The man explained the anatomy of an organ to you, as one explains the anatomy of a living being, as one explains the parts of a heart. There were the pipes, yes, that's the soul. But each individual pipe was an art form. The largest could be 6 meters, the bourdon, the deep, dark rumble. The smallest, as large as your little finger. And the tones. "Every pipe must be in tune," he said, "and not just in isolation, but together with every other pipe, in harmony, in consonance. There are often 3,000 pipes, 3,000 individual voices, 3,000 lives that become a single voice." "And how long does it take you to build one?" you asked. "That depends," he said. "My current organ will take 3 years, but an organ builder doesn't calculate in years. An organ builder calculates in sound. A bad organ made quickly isn't quick, but mad. A good organ that takes time isn't slow, but correct. Because it's correct, it's quick. Craft knows no time." The man described the workshop in Ludwigsburg, an old house with high rooms and large windows facing south, where light streamed in all year round. Everywhere wood, spruces from the Black Forest and from the Harz, hard and golden. Oak wood for the pipe bodies, old oak, more than 100 years old. Linden wood for the delicate, complex work. "The wood speaks," he said. And you already knew this word from other craftsmen, from violin makers and basket makers. When you take a piece of wood and regard it for a long time, if you're patient, it tells you what it wants to be. A register, a pipe, a wind channel, a console. He spoke of the metals, the tin needed for the pipes, the alloy he'd calibrate like an alchemist. "Tin changes with temperature," he said. "In winter, the tin is harder. In summer, softer. You have to know that. You have to build the seasons into the chemistry." He also described the human voice, how an organ couldn't just be mechanical, but must breathe like a singer. "The best organ," he said, "is one where you don't think that wood and metal are speaking. You think a human is singing, a very great human with an immortal voice." "Why is that so important?" you asked. "Why not just faster?" The man grew silent. The train rushed on, past fields and forests and villages with church spires. "Because," he said finally, "when an organ is made right and a person presses the keys, you can hear heaven. It's not music, though it is music. It's more. It's the voice of creation flowing through a human's hands and speaking to other people who want to hear it." His eyes were moist. He was serious. "I'm 56 years old," he said slowly. "I perhaps have another 40 years of work, if I'm lucky and no war comes. In those 40 years, I might build 5 great organs, only 5. But these 5 organs will sing for 100 years, perhaps 200 years. The sound is timeless. The sound outlives all generations. The organ in Ludwigsburg that my grandfather built in 1862, it still sings. I know it. I was there and heard it, and it sings. He also described the challenge of maintaining balance. Too much wind, and the pipes become restless, too wild. Too little wind, and they suffocate. It's like breathing, he said. The organ must breathe like a living human, in and out, in and out. The train began to slow. Ludwigsburg was approaching. Ludwigsburg, the man said. That's my home. That's where I do my work. That's where my hands will grow old. And that's where I'll build my organ. He carefully packed away the plans, as if packing sacred texts, gospels from God's own hand. The man also had a book with him, old notes, handwritten scores of organ music pieces. This book, he said, my grandfather wrote. They are pieces that can only be played on organs he built. They fit his organs the way clothes fit a body. He also showed you small models of organs on his knees. This here, he said, is the organ my grandfather built in 1862. 16 registers, 27 pipes per register if you count them all. More than 400 pipes, all from wood and metal and courage. You said it sounded very complicated. Yes, he said, it is complicated. But when it's done right, it's simple. The best music is simple. The organ I'm building now, he said, before the train grew too slow, will be the last great organ I build, I think. After that, my time might be over. But this organ will sing for 400 years. 400 years! If that's not a life, if that's not a whole life, then I don't know what a life is. You're sleeping now, he said to you, even though you weren't tired, even though your heart was still beating fast. But remember, sometimes when you go into a church and hear an organ, remember that there's a human behind that music. A human who believes that God's hands work through him. That's the highest thing there is. The church radio falls silent. The organ echoes in your ears, even though no sound plays anymore, even though the man is long gone. You don't open your eyes. The sound remains, a life in you that never leaves. The organ builder no longer sits beside you, but the heaven he described still shimmers. 3,000 pipes sing you to sleep, quietly, gently, infinitely soft. The train passed through a tunnel, and for a moment, everything was dark outside. Only the rushing sound, only the echo of the wheels against the tunnel walls. Ta-dum, ta-dum. And then we were out again, and the night received us again like a mother taking her child back in her arms after a brief outing. I thought how beautiful that is. Tunnel and night, and tunnel again, and night again, and onward, and onward. And eventually, you don't notice anymore what's outside and what's inside, because everything flows together, because everything becomes one, because sleep is so close that you can already smell it. Today, on the platform, the sound of water from an open window. A stream falls into a gutter, and the sound is clear, melodic, like a song your heart recognizes. You open your eyes for just a second, and you're back. It's 1942. The journey from Bonn to Koblenz. The train smells of wartime, of sweat and dirty coal smoke, of fear and weariness. The man across from you has hands as working hands should be. Large, massive, scarred, with deep earth beneath the nails that won't wash away because it's grown into the skin like a tattoo. He wears old leather gaiters round his calves and a worn linen suit that's turned grey from the sun and dust of many building sites. His face is weathered like fieldstone, his hair white and bushy like sheep's wool, appearing infinitely old. He could be 60 or 80. It's impossible to say. He's as old as the earth is old, and just as patient. "You love water," he said suddenly, without looking at you, without knowing you, without ever having seen you before. "I see it in your face when you heard the window, when the water called you." It was true. You'd leaned forward toward the sound, drawn by something older than thought. "I'm a well builder," he said simply. "My whole life is water, more than 70 years. He told you of his craft with words that came slowly like water itself, like it drops through limestone, year after year, century after century. A well builder is not simply a hole maker, he explained. No, that would be the most superficial interpretation. He's a listener, a spirit who listens. He listens into the earth with all his senses, with sounding rods, with his ear placed directly on the ground, with a feeling older than words. He senses where the water lies, at what depth, in what quantity, whether it's clean or hard. The ground speaks to him in a language older than German, older than Latin, older than all language altogether. "I've worked all over the Rhineland," he said. "In Düsseldorf, in Cologne, in Remagen, in Koblenz, in 100 smaller places whose names time has forgotten." And he described these villages like someone who carries them not in memory but burned into the soul. Villages with their medieval stones discolored by 1,000 rainfalls, their churches with pointed spires reaching to heaven, their narrow streets from the deepest Middle Ages, where light came only around midday, like the visit of a rare guest. "In Remagen," he said, "I dug a well in 1910, before 2 world times. The stone was red, like blood mixed with brick, hard as granite, hard as flint. It was terrible breaking that stone. My arms were shattered like raw meat for 2 weeks. But beneath it, 10 meters beneath it, deep under everything, was the water. Not much, but pure, cold as glacier melt from the Black Forest. The village drank from it for 15 years, 100 people, every day." The man spoke as if talking about a child he'd brought into the world and who'd grown up without him. He described the old technology. The sounding rods you lowered, lowered, lowered. You listened. You felt with your hands how the ground changed. Gravel, sand, clay, slate. Layers like the layers of a book. An experienced well builder could feel from the vibration of the rod which layer he'd reached, how much deeper he still had to go. "It's like music," he said, "like a musician's ear. Each layer has its own tone. Once you've made 100 wells, 150, 200, then you know all the tones." The brass lamps of the train swung in their holders. Outside, the Rhineland passed by, valleys and heights, forests still dark from spring moisture, from rain and mystery. The man continued telling, but now his voice grew quieter, like someone speaking from far away, from another time. The war destroyed much. A well in Aachen that I made in 1924 was bombed. The whole city destroyed. Everything. The wells too. Many of them. He spoke it the way you speak when something final has happened, when it's too late to mourn. "But you know," he said, and now he looked at you directly for the first time, his eyes like lakes, like ancient lakes. "The water is still there, under the ruins. The water waits. The water forgives. It forgives the war. It forgives the destruction. It simply waits." His eyes were blue, small, but deep as a well itself, with echoes from the depths. "A well builder," he said, "is not like a carpenter building a house. A house can collapse. It's stone and wood. It's mortal, like everything on this earth. But a well, a true well, it goes to the root, to the absolute foundation. The well builder bores through all layers, through gravel and clay and sandstone and dark slate, through everything, until he reaches the ground. And there is life. You can't destroy that, no matter how much war, no matter how much destruction." He spoke of the wells of his youth, of the great stone well troughs in village centers, where women fetched their water in copper buckets in the early morning, with water cloths inside, and of the wells he'd made in newer times, with pumps and metal pipes, modern, mechanical, part of the new world. "But the core," he said, "remains the same. It's always an opening into the depths. It's always reverence for what lives below." The train leaned into a slow curve, and the man reached for his seat with the large, scar-covered hand. His hand trembled slightly, not from age, but from inner strength, from all those years of work. "I'm going to Koblenz," he said, "because there's an old house there, 400 years old, with an old well. The well doesn't work anymore. The family wants to restore it, bring it back to life. I'm perhaps one of the last who can do that. In 10 years, nobody will know anymore. Nobody will remember whether well builders existed." He said it without sadness, but with a kind of knowledge, a truth that's long been decided, like fate itself. "My son," he said further, "wants to be a well builder, I think. But he's still young, and war will come. We all see it. When war comes, many things will die. Maybe well builders too. But the water remains. The water will remain." He looked out the window, and his face was like fieldstone, old and hard and unshakable. He also showed Jim notes, pictures of wells he'd built. A well in Bonn with stonework from the 17th century. Another in a village whose name he'd forgotten, but the well remained in his memory like a favorite person. "This well," he said, "was special. The village wasn't wealthy, but the family that needed the well was old, very old. They had documents from the 16th century, and they wanted a well that would suit their family. The water on today's platform still drips. The sound is now like a prayer, like something sacred that you can't touch. You think of all the wells, of the depth beneath every ground, of the water that can't be lost no matter what happens. The well builder still sits across from you, invisible, but very present, very real, as if he couldn't die, couldn't age, as if he were himself like a well, inexhaustible, eternal. Later you learn that there are well builders who work for 100 years, some even longer, because the craft keeps them, because the craft keeps them young. You drift like water, slowly, deep, without hurrying, without rush. Beneath you, the layers of the earth, pierced by thousands of wells. Within them, the water. Within them, the life that doesn't end. And so we traveled on, the train and I and the few other passengers sitting with me in the compartment or in neighboring ones, each in their own small corner of the world, each on their own path towards sleep. The warmth of the carriage, the quiet crackling of the heating, the click of the wheels on the points, all of this became one shared song, a song without words, a song that carries you and calms you and says, "You may let go now. You may rest now." The train travels on for you. Time travels on for you. The world arranges itself while you sleep. Today, in the compartment, the soft ticking of an old pocket watch. One of the other passengers opens it with careful fingers, and the sound is like a heartbeat from another time. You recognize the sound immediately. It's 1936, and you're sitting across from a man whose hands never stay still, trembling with inner strength. The journey from Dresden to Chemnitz. It was cold then, November, and the train steamed like a monster of steel and fire, thick black clouds from the chimney dissolving in the cold sky. The man beside you wore a worn brown suit with stains of machine oil that no washing could remove, a suit that showed a lifetime of work. He held a leather case on his lap that he never released, not for a second, even as he lit a cigarette. His hands were small and more art than flesh, you thought, each finger marked by decades at the file and the magnifying glass, the knuckles enlarged like old trees, the nails perfectly trimmed and immovable. "You can look freely," the man said suddenly, even though you'd done nothing special, only looked over with interest. Most people hide their curiosity. They see me and want to ask, but don't dare. A stranger, an unfamiliar workshop, a mystery. He opened the leather case with a care that bordered on reverence, with the slowness of a priest opening a sanctuary. Inside, on purple velvet cushions, lay dozens of watches, perhaps 50, small, medium, large, each in its own depression. Some as tiny as hazelnuts with a silver case, so small they'd fit in your fist. Some with thick chrome-plated housings that looked heavy and solid like armor. The man was from Glashütte, he said. That sounded like holiness, like saying you're from Jerusalem or Venice, from a place of craftsmanship. Glashütte was for watchmakers what Mittenwald was for violin makers, what Rome was for painters and sculptors, a place where time itself became craft, where 1,000 people did only that, all of them, all with the same thoughts in their heads, a village of precision. The man picked up one of the medium watches, a pocket watch with a silver case, and opened it carefully. The interior was as complicated as a flower's calyx, hundreds of tiny wheels, steel spirals like snakes, springs like miniature bridges, all so small you could barely see them with the naked eye. 17 years of apprenticeship, he said. My father was also a watchmaker. My grandfather too. My great-grandfather came from Furtwangen in the Black Forest and was a trained watchmaker under a master whose name is forgotten. You see, this isn't just a profession. It's a family. It's a way of thinking, breathing, seeing. His eyes were still bright and sharp behind thick glasses with strong lenses that sat on his nose like a rider on a horse that won't fall, no matter how wild the gallop. He told you about the workshop in Glashütte, a narrow house with large south-facing windows where the light was precious in winter and burning hot in summer. The magnifying glass at the window that captured almost the whole light ray and concentrated it on a few millimeters of workspace where a man's whole universe lay. He described how you hear a watch mechanism when something's wrong, when the suspension is faulty, or a tooth doesn't fit, or the balance isn't centered. A good watch, he said, tells a story with every tick. It tells you whether it's happy, whether it rests peacefully in itself. You wanted to laugh, but his seriousness was contagious, like a disease. You believed him completely. The brass lamp above the window swung in its holder, and outside dark coniferous forests, fields, small villages with smoke from chimneys passed by. The man took time to show you every watch, each single one. One's mechanism was made of blackish, gleaming steel, hard as stone. Another's was silver, like frozen moonlight. Here, he said, pointing to an almost invisible spiral. You see the spiral? That's the heart. Everything revolves around it. If that's wrong by 1/100th of a millimeter, only that much, the whole watch loses 2 minutes a day. How can you tell? You asked. By the ticking, he answered simply. I hear it, just as a violinist hears when his string is wrongly tuned. I hear when a watch doesn't run true, when it doesn't have a pure heartbeat. He held one of the watches to his ear. The ticking was quiet but regular as the heart of a sleeping child, infinite and reliable. That one's good, he said, and nodded slowly. That one could run for another 100 years. He spoke of his apprentices, of boys with raw, cracked fingers, learning to see the way one sees steel, when you observe it long enough, when you understand that it speaks. He told how you feel with your hand whether a spring is taut enough, how you check the teeth of a wheel with bare eyes when the magnifying glass isn't enough, or when you're too tired. It's all patience, he said, and love. You must love the watch, otherwise it never succeeds. The workshop itself wasn't large, but it was perfect. On the walls hung tools in an order that was itself an art form. Files of various sizes, turning tools of polished steel like mirrors. Tweezers, the finest steel tweezers, 100 variations. Each tweezer has its task, he said. This one is for the tiniest wheels, for work where you think a human eye could never see it. But if you have patience, if you sit correctly, with good light, then you see it. The train continued to sway over the rails. The man slowly packed the watches back into his case, each to its exact place. It was a ritual, sacred as a prayer, like laying out relics. I'm going to Chemnitz, he said, because an old watch there needs a new hairspring. It's from 1880, more than 50 years old. The owner wanted to throw it away into the rubbish. I could convince him that it's alive, that you don't only live because you're young. The man spoke of the work itself, of years of practice. "When you're young," he said, "you need the magnifying glass, and you need 10 hours for a small repair. When you're old, as I am now, you sometimes need only 3 hours. Not because your eyes are better, that's not true, but because your hands know what to do. The hands store everything. They store years of experience, hundreds of watches, thousands of small problems and their solutions." He also showed you a watch he wore himself on a silver chain on his suit. "That's a watch from 1899. My father built it. It's 37 years old. It still keeps perfect time, not a minute's deviation per month." You asked him how that was possible. "Because," he said, "craft and love are the same thing." The man opened one last watch, one of the larger ones. "This," he said, "is a station clock for a railway station. People need to be able to see what time it is when they look from the platform. Thousands of people look at this watch every day. Thousands of people depend on the accuracy of this watch. That's a responsibility." Before the train came to a complete halt, the man said, "In my life, I've made more than 10,000 repairs. 10,000 small operations on 10,000 watches. Each one a success story. Each one a small miracle." Then he'd stood up and was gone, quickly, with his leather case. Now, in the compartment of today, the pocket watch still ticks. The other passenger closes it. The sound fades. You know that this man from Glashütte has long since died, that most of these watches have probably gone to other hands or to museums. But the ticking remains. It remains like an echo that doesn't die, that never dies. You close your eyes. In the darkness, you still hear it. Tick, tick, tick. Regular, reliable, the heart of time, still beating, still alive. The train passed through a tunnel, and for a moment, everything was dark outside. Only the rushing sound, only the echo of the wheels against the tunnel walls. Ta-dum, ta-dum. And then we were out again, and the night received us again, like a mother taking her child back in her arms after a brief outing. I thought how beautiful that is. Tunnel and night, and tunnel again, and night again, and onward, and eventually you don't notice anymore what's outside and what's inside, because everything flows together, because everything becomes one, because sleep is so close that you can already smell it. Today, in the compartment, someone opens a violin case. The snap of the clasp, the rustle of dark velvet inside. The strings glimmer in the lamplight. You close your eyes, and you're there again. It was 1928, on the journey from Mittenwald to Munich. The train smelled of coal and damp leather, of the fur coat of an elderly lady 2 rows ahead. You sat by the window, and across from you sat a man in a light suit with a large black violin case. He was mid-50s, with silver temples, and moved with the care of a man for whom every gesture held meaning. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from a kind of inner excitement. The man opened his case slowly, as if waking a child. The violin lay on red velvet, the scroll gleaming like genuine ebony, and the 4 strings shimmered gold-yellow in the light of the brass lamp above the window. He didn't take it out, but only looked at it, the way you look at old letters you've read 100 times. Then he said, without looking at you, "Don't laugh, but I'm nervous, like on the first day, like 35 years ago when I was still an apprentice." His voice was soft, with an inflection from the mountains, melodic even when he spoke of mundane things. He told you about Mittenwald, about his workshop in a house with pink plastered walls and green foliage all around, about the firs that surrounded it, already turning white with the first snow and protecting the sky like a crown. He was a violin maker, one of the last of the old line, as he said. His father had done it, his grandfather too. His great-grandfather had gone into the workshop when he was 5 years old. The family had a secret with the wood, a way with the oil and the light, a philosophy with the temperatures and the humidity that nobody else understood and nobody else could learn, because it couldn't be taught. It had to be in the bones. "This piece here," he said, gesturing to the violin, "is 15 years old. I made it in 1913, before everything changed." He didn't speak of world events or wars, but of the years when timber merchants were still generous, when you could get the best spruces from the Black Forest, when you could wait weeks for the right piece of spruce without anyone being in a hurry, because time itself ran differently then. The train swayed rhythmically over the rails. The brass lamp above you swung in its cast iron holder. The man pulled a soft cloth from his pocket and polished the violin, never taking his eyes off it. His fingers moved in circles, gently, meditatively. "I'm going to Munich," he said, "because a professor wants to see the violin. He knows about music, yes, but even more about craft. He can read what the hands did. He'll see what I knew when I built it." You asked him what he'd known back then while he was working. He was silent for a long time, longer than was comfortable. The train traveled through green forests where light entered from the side and cast long dark shadows on the forest paths. "That a violin maker doesn't create an instrument," he said finally, "but that he allows it to come into being. It's different. You choose the wood, yes, that's your task. You cut it, you plane it, you tap it on all corners to test the sound. But at some point, when you stop trying and only help, the wood speaks to you, and then you obey. That's the difference between a violin maker and someone who makes violins." He told you of the workshops in Mittenwald, of apprentices with red hands and white dust from wood all over their clothes, of wood shavings turning like gold from a fairy tale in the morning rays. He described how you hear the age of the wood when you tap against it, how you can tell by the sound whether the rings are tight or loose, whether the wood grew in a dry or wet summer. "My father could do that," he said. "I can almost do it. My son might be able to, if time allows and if war doesn't come. And war may come." The man spoke of choosing wood like a love story. You travel to the forest masters. You look at dozens of pieces of wood. You read them like a Bible. Each piece has its own color, its own bend, its own soul. The spruce must be young, but not too young. It must grow with a certain density, not quickly, but deliberately, rings as tight as hair. "It can take 10 years," he said, "to find the right piece. And then you must buy it and store it. It must dry, but not quickly, only slowly, patiently, over years. A good piece of spruce needs 5 years to dry. The train traveled on, and the man told of the processing, of tools that had been in the family for 100 years, little planes with handles of cherry wood, their sharpness so finely tuned you could split a hair. These planes, he said, I inherited from my father. They need no maintenance if you treat them with love. They tell you when something's wrong. When the blade grows dull, you feel it in your hands immediately. He showed you his hands, the palms full of calluses, the fingers slightly curved from decades of work, from gripping these planes, this tool that was his life. The journey lengthened with his words. The man spoke of the first time he saw one of his violins in the hands of a child. A girl from Munich who didn't know him, whose parents trusted his grandfather. And the child played for 2 minutes, badly and restlessly, with a strained face. The violin slipped on her shoulder, the bow hold was wild. But the man said he'd heard in those 2 minutes that the violin was made correctly. It sang through all the child's mistakes. It sang despite everything, despite the lack of skill. It sang, and that was all that mattered. The child didn't understand yet, but the parents did, and the grandfather just nodded because he knew his grandson had made the right violin. The man also spoke of mistakes that happened over the years. A violin he'd made in 1908 had become too dark. He didn't know why back then. Only much later, years later, did he understand that he'd used too much of the wrong oil. The wood had been suffocated, couldn't breathe anymore. The violin still played, but it was sad. I did that later, he said, and it hurt. A mother watches her child suffer, and that's terrible. So I was then. A bad violin is like a sick child. War may not come next year, the man said, and it was unclear whether he hoped or feared it. Or it will come. But the craftsmen remain. The craft remains. It's older than any time we live in, older than any empire. He packed the violin again in the velvet, slowly, reverently, as if preparing a sacred thing. The man also spoke of his competitors, of the new age in which machines built violins, quickly, cheaply, without soul. The factories make violins for poor people, he said, and that's good. I'm not against factories. But it's not the same. A handmade violin and a factory-made violin are as different as a poem and a newspaper advertisement. Both have words, but only one has a soul. He spoke without bitterness, only with a kind of sadness, like speaking of something you love that's slowly disappearing. As the train pulled into Munich and the wheels squealed as they slowed, the man stood, placed the case on his lap, and nodded to you. "Thank you," he said, "for listening. Not many do." Then he was gone, a slender figure with his black case on the platform, where the gas lamps were just being lit from below with open flame, 1 spark per lamp. The case closes again in the compartment of today. The brass lamp still sways. You sink into the velvet cushions and think of wood that sings. The wheels of the train create an old rhythm that goes deeper than time. Your breathing becomes calm. The Mittenwald Mountains rest somewhere within you, and the violin rests too. You drift away. Imagine yourself on the train from Eberbach to Amorbach, and beside you sits a woman with a professional camera round her neck. Her name is Petra, and she's spent the whole summer photographing squirrels in the Odenwald. Petra shows you her pictures, carefully organized on her phone. She has hundreds, thousands of them. Squirrels cracking nuts, their teeth almost gleaming. Squirrels playing, fighting, jumping. Squirrels leaping through the trees with an elegance you can really only see in photographs. But what's special, what's truly special, is that Petra's been at it long enough that she knows the squirrels the way you know another person. She has names for them, real names, not just numbers. The reddish, muscular one that always sits at the old oak and defends its territory is called Rudy. The little grey one that's particularly curious and sticks its nose into everything is Fritzy. She knows their habits, their favorite spots, their daily routines, their relationships with each other. She tells you she sets out at 5 in the morning when the world still sleeps. The Odenwald is still dark at that hour, almost black, still cool, still full of the night. The forest air is fresh and intense, suffused with the sweet fragrance of the resin from the ancient oaks and spruces, from moss and moisture. The moss beneath your feet is wet with dew, drinks from your shoes. It's like entering another world, a world that only a few people see. At that hour, the forest belongs only to the animals, only to the wild creatures. The birds are just beginning to sing, at first hesitantly, then louder. Sometimes you see deer or roe deer just heading out to feed before the sun comes and the people. Petra has her fixed spots, her favorite corners of the Odenwald. At a certain ancient gnarled oak, at least 100 years old, the squirrels always appear, every morning. At a particular spruce tree with low branches, perfect for photographing, they're most fond of gathering. Petra knows these places like her own kitchen, better than her own kitchen. She stands there in the darkness and cold, with her heavy professional camera, her thick jacket, and waits. Waits patiently for the squirrels to come, to emerge from their nests. Waits for the sun to rise and the magic to begin. The train rocks quietly. You imagine yourself sitting with Petra in the Odenwald, waiting. How the sun slowly rises, how the light gradually pushes through the forest crowns, how the squirrels grow ever more restless, until finally they emerge from their nests, curious, active, alive. How Petra photographs again and again, with a calm and patience that's admirable. She tells you that squirrels are truly intelligent animals, far more intelligent than many people in the city. They have an impressive, incredible memory. They know where their thousands of hidden nuts are, even when they've hidden hundreds or thousands of them, can find their way back to all of them with navigation that's perfect. They know which people are dangerous to them, which dogs and hawks are dangerous. They remember which photographer is harmless, who sits every morning and just watches, just documents. After a while, if you hold still long enough and stay with true patience, if you really, absolutely don't move, don't speak, they ignore you completely. They live their lives normally, wildly, and you only document. You're like a shadow. You're like air. You're like part of the forest. Petra shows you her favorite photograph, the one she loves most. It's Rudy, the reddish, muscular squirrel, sitting on a thick branch and looking into the distance, in the direction danger comes from. The sun has just risen, and the light is golden, alchemical. Rudy's fur is brilliant red, almost orange red, nearly transparent from the sunlight. You can see Rudy's fur, see its structure. You can see the details, every single hair, the structure of Rudy's ears, its whiskers. And in Rudy's eye, in that small, glistening black point, you see a spark of what it means to be a wild animal. Freedom, alertness, life, instinct, a soul. She tells you that these photographs don't come easily, that they're the result of years and years. Sometimes she sits 4 hours in the forest, motionless, patient, and shoots hundreds of images, hundreds of attempts, of which perhaps only one, maybe only one, is really good. It's craft and art form at once. It's science and love. You need the technical knowledge, you see, the fundamental understanding, the aperture, the shutter speed, the ISO sensitivity. Everything must be right. But you also need patience and love for your subject, a deep love. You must understand the animal, respect it, love it like a friend. Petra sits beside you on the train, very present, and you notice from her voice, from her aura, that the squirrels have changed her life, completed it. She was before an ordinary photographer, did weddings and portraits and corporate events. It was lucrative, but soulless. But then she began photographing squirrels, first as a hobby, as compensation, as escape. But the hobby quickly became passion, obsession, mission in her life. Now she shows her work in galleries, in prestigious galleries. She's had exhibitions, sales, recognition. A photography book about the squirrels of the Odenwald has just been published, is already famous in the photographer community. The train grows slower. The sun sends its last rays through the forests. The green landscape of the Odenwald grows darker, more mysterious. Petra tells you of the rhythm of summer, how squirrels raise babies, how they train, how they collect nuts for autumn and winter, how life unfolds at the pace of the seasons. She tells of special moments when she takes a photograph that's perfect, that captures exactly what she saw, how time stops, freezes in that moment, how only she and the squirrel exist, how the world disappears, how the connection between photographer and animal manifests in an image that can be stored forever, that becomes timeless, that carries the essence of wildness within it. These moments are rarer than you think, Petra says, but when they come, they're magical. The journey to Armabach is long. The Odenwald slowly grows dark. Petra tells you of her future plans. She wants to go deeper, wants to photograph more squirrels, wants to write a second book, wants to have exhibitions, wants to show others how wonderful these animals are. She wants to become the ambassador of squirrels for her whole life. Petra closes her eyes. You notice she too is growing tired. Her voice grows softer, more dreamy, She tells you of the quiet times between sessions, when she sits with her images and edits them. How she looks at the photographs and tries to understand what they really show. How the squirrels are her teacher if she only looks. The train grows very quiet now, becomes a whisper. You notice your own eyes growing heavy, your eyelids weary. You imagine yourself sitting with Petra in the warm Odenwald, waiting for the squirrels with endless patience. The forest air is warm and soft, suffused with the intense fragrance of resins, with the dappled, dancing sunlight that falls through the leaves and creates patterns. Somewhere nearby, a cool stream rushes, quiet, rhythmic, like a melody. The squirrels are all around you, playing with each other, feeding, living their wild life. You don't need your camera anymore. You just need to sit and watch, to exist, to breathe. And the landscape outside grew softer. The outlines of trees dissolved, the fields became dark shapes, and the moon sometimes slid its pale light across them. I felt my breathing slow, my heart slow, my whole body sinking down into the warm embrace of the seat, the warm embrace of this train, carrying me without any effort on my part. It was a good feeling, a rare feeling, to be carried, without struggle, simply trusting that the wheels keep turning, that the rails lead somewhere, that morning will come. And as the train traveled on through the night, ta-dum, ta-dum, I noticed how my thoughts grew slower, how the images in my head grew softer, how the edges blurred. The voices I'd heard became a gentle hum, a hum like distant bees, or like an old song you heard as a child and can't quite remember now. The warm air current in the compartment wrapped around me like a blanket, and I felt how my shoulders slowly sank, how the tension of the day fell away from me, piece by piece, like leaves falling from a tree, without hurry, without sorrow. Imagine yourself on the train from Kronach to Ludwigstadt, and beside you sits a woman with a large magnifying glass in her bag and a notebook full of drawings. Her name is Ursula, and for years she's been cataloguing the fern species of the Frankenforest. Ursula is a quiet woman, a woman of observation rather than speech. But when she speaks, her words carry a deep, loving, scientific understanding of ferns. She shows you pages from her notebook, which she carries everywhere. Each page is filled with fine, precise pencil drawings, with Latin names in neat handwriting, with notes about locations, light conditions, soil composition, elevation, neighboring plants. She knows ferns you've never even heard of, knows their names, their habitats, their peculiarities. The lady fern, delicate and finely feathered. The male fern, with its dark green fronds. The majestic bracken. The great shield fern. The tiny wallrue with its spores. The delicate hart's tongue fern, with its undivided leaves. She explains to you that each fern has its niche in the Frankenforest. No two locations are exactly alike. This fern loves the moist, shadowed side of a stream bed. That one needs the warmth of a sunny, rocky slope. Still others grow only on rotting logs or in the moist understory. The forest is like a great puzzle, and the ferns are the pieces that complete the picture. Ursula sits beside you, her hands small and elegant, like a musician's hands. And as the train rushes through the green mountains of the Frankenforest, as the landscape flows past like liquid green, she tells you of her expeditions, her journeys into the forest, her life among the ferns. How she sets out in the morning, sometimes very early, with her worn notebook, her magnifying lens, her comprehensive identification book, her compass, her camera. The Frankenforest is overwhelming for a beginner. There's too much green, too much life. There are so many ferns, hundreds of species, so much variation between them, so many subtle, fine differences that you could despair. But after years, after 10 or 15 years of intense observation, you learn to see them with full awareness, completely. You learn to recognize the differences, the subtle, absolutely crucial differences. A leaflet here, a vein pattern there, the arrangement of veins, a subtle difference in the frond shape, the exact position of the spore cases on the underside. She tells of a special find in early August, a moment that changed her life. She was in the forest after an intense rainstorm. The air was completely saturated with moisture, with steam, like in a greenhouse. The ground was wet, positively dripping. The understory was like a swamp, like a bog. Life sprang everywhere from the earth. Everything exploded in green. And there she saw it, a fern she'd never seen before, not in all her life, not in all her years. She photographed it from several angles, measured it exactly, compared it in her identification book. Days later, after intense research and comparison with experts and other fern specialists, it turned out to be a rare, very rare species. A species that doesn't normally occur in this region. A species that perhaps grows there only once every 100 years. She had discovered a scientific sensation without knowing it. The train rocks steadily. Outside, the green landscapes rush past. You imagine walking with Ursula through the Frankenforest. The forest is green, green everywhere. But it's no monotonous green. Each plant has its own shade of green. The light falls dappled through the dense leaf canopy. Everywhere you hear the soft rush of streams. The ground beneath your feet is mossy and cool. It smells of damp earth, of resin, of the intense fragrance of the forest's resins. Ursula shows you how to observe a fern exactly, very exactly, precisely, the way a doctor reads a pulse. You need your magnifying glass, your patience, your whole mind. You must understand the exact shape of the fronds, the precise arrangement of the small leaflets, the position of the spore cases on the fine underside of the fronds, the tiny, almost invisible details that mean everything, that revealed the secret. It's like reading an ancient, sacred text, a language the ferns speak. A fern tells you its complete story, its home, its life, its purpose, if you only know how to listen, how to truly see. Ursula slowly shows you with her magnifying glass where the shield fern grows, a large, truly majestic, impressive fern with thick, dark green, almost blackish green, scaly fronds, like little shields, like armor. And beside it, in the gentle half shade of a moist, cool, rocky slope, grows the delicate, elegant heart's tongue fern, one of her absolute favorites, with its undivided tongue-like leaves, simple but elegant, delicate but strong. She tells you that she's now working on a specialist book about the ferns of the Frankenforest, a comprehensive work. It will take several years, perhaps a decade, but Ursula has time. She's learned to live at the forest's pace, in the rhythm of nature. The forest has its own measure of time that doesn't match human measures. In summer, everything grows quickly, but ferns are patient, are old souls. They need years, sometimes decades, to attain their full form. Some ferns live 40 years, some even older, Ursula tells you softly. A fern that's older than a person. The train grows slower, quieter. The sun sends its last, most considered rays through the forests, golden arrows gently touching the earth. Everything is bathed in warm, soft, dreamy, almost transparent light. Ursula has her notebook on her lap. Her hands rest quietly on it, like on a sacred book. She looks out the window at the passing mountains of the Frankenforest, at the endless hills, at the green, breathing wave of the forest. Her eyes are gentle, contemplative, quiet, wise, like the eyes of an old forest person. She sees the forest the way only a few people see it, with a whole heart and mind. The train travels on through the sinking sun. Ursula tells you of coming tours, of ambitious plans to find more rare ferns, to discover more, to catalogue more. She wants to make a comprehensive register, a complete lexicon of all the ferns of the Frankenforest. It's her mission, her life's work, her legacy to science and to love of nature. She tells you of special, sacred moments when she discovers a new fern, a fern she's never seen before. How she stops, how time stops, how she waits, observes, studies. How she takes time, much time, to understand, really to understand what she sees. Which fern it is, where it grows, why it's here. How the forest's mystery slowly reveals itself to her, like a flower opening. How it feels like a gift from nature, like a revelation. These moments are the center of her life, are the reason she wakes up in the morning. The train grows darker. Ludwigstadt draws near. Ursula is almost asleep, her eyes half closed. But she tells you still, in a weak voice, of her dreams. She dreams of ferns in all shapes, all colors. She dreams of the Frankenforest that's endless, infinitely green. She dreams of finding all the ferns, understanding all of them, before she dies. Ursula closes her eyes. You notice she too is growing tired. Her voice grows softer. She tells you of the sound of streams, of the rustling of ferns when wind passes through their fronds, how it sounds like waves on the sea, how the ferns dance in the summer wind. The train grows very quiet now. You notice your own eyes growing heavy. You imagine yourself sitting with Ursula in the moist shade of a Frankenforest, watching the ferns. They're everywhere, glowing in different greens. The light falls in fine streaks through the fronds. It smells of damp earth and forest. The sound of the streams grows ever louder in your ears until it becomes the same melody as your breath. And so we traveled on. The train and I, and the few other passengers sitting with me in the compartment, or in neighboring ones, each in their own small corner of the world, each on their own path towards sleep. The warmth of the carriage, the quiet crackling of the heating, the click of the wheels on the points, all of this became one shared song, a song without words, a song that carries you and calms you and says, "You may let go now. You may rest now." The train travels on for you. Time travels on for you. The world arranges itself while you sleep. Imagine yourself on the train from Altenkirchen to Hachenburg, and beside you sits a woman whose hands smell of honey and beeswax. Her name is Helga, and she's the beekeeper of the Westerwald forest. Helga keeps her hives at the boundary between spruce and fir, where the forest is densest and teeming with life. She shows you on her old, crumpled, well-used forest map, full of markings, exactly where the hives stand. Little red marks and numbers and personal notes. It's a secret place that only a few know, that only those who belong there know it. The forest there is old, ancient, with trees 100 years or older, some perhaps 200. The spruces and firs form a dense, impenetrable canopy, so thick that hardly any direct sun reaches through, but enough diffused green light to bring forth the most wonderful forest flowers, to support the hidden beauty of the forest flora. She tells you that the honey from this forest tastes different from every other honey. If you're there at 5 in the morning, when the sun has just begun to touch the forest crowns, and when the bees emerge from their hives, then you can capture that special moment. The bees fly to the flowers of the firs, to the delicate, greenish flower catkins, to the secret flowers of forest herbs that grow only in the shade of the ancient trees. Helga sits beside you, very close, and you notice from her voice that she's proud of her bees, that she loves them like a child. She speaks of them like friends, like family. She knows every queen by name, has names for them that only she knows. She knows which hive thrives and which weakens, which is sick, which is particularly productive. She sits with them, observes them for hours, listens to them, learns from them. The buzzing of the bees is like a language she's learned to understand, a language in which she now thinks and dreams. The train rushes through the green landscape of the Westerwald. You imagine how Helga wanders to her hives in the morning before the world wakes. The forest is still cool then, dark green, mysterious, full of shadows and hidden paths. The forest air smells intensely of resin and moss, and of something even deeper, something you can't name. The dappled sunlight is pale and watery still, like a photographic negative. It's like entering a cathedral made of wood and leaf, a sacred place. The forest floor beneath your feet is mossy, cool, damp, like a damp hand greeting you. There are scarcely any sounds except the soft rush of a distant stream and the lonely song of early birds announcing the day. Helga explains to you intensely that forest honey is not golden like normal, simple flower honey, not that sweet, light, simple color. It's dark brown, sometimes nearly black, almost greenish black, like concentrated night, like liquid forest, like liquid time. It tastes less sweet, Less simple, more intense instead, much more complex, with notes and undertones that are hard to describe. Forest, you might say, or mystery, or depth, or the forest's age. Forest honey is the honey of the trees themselves, not from flowers and leaves, but from the secretion of aphids on the spruces and firs, those delicate, hidden insects that drink from the bark and secrete nectar. The bees gather this precious, rare sap the way preachers gather holy words, and Helga harvests it with great care, with deep respect for the whole process. She shows you a jar of this honey from her bag, small but precious, with a handwritten label. You can hardly believe that's honey, this dark, concentrated substance. It's so dark, so concentrated, so intense, like concentrated night. Helga opens the jar very carefully and slowly, and you immediately smell the forest in its most complex, deepest form. The whole, complex, wondrous forest, with all its fragrances and essences. Resin, intense, rolling resin. Moss, black, damp earth. Mushrooms, and something even deeper. She offers you a spoon, and you carefully taste this honey. The honey is fluid, not creamy or hard like normal flower honey. It tastes of trees, of their sap, of time, of patience. It's like drinking the essence of the forest itself. Helga tells you that beekeeping in the Westerwald is an old, old tradition, that there were beekeepers when the forest was even larger. Her grandmother was also a beekeeper, a strong woman who managed her hives alone. She taught Helga everything, not always with words, but with actions, with patience. How to respect the bees, how to talk with them, how to read their signs, understand their moods, how to harvest the honey without hurting the bees, without robbing them. Helga loves her bees unconditionally. Absolutely. And you hear it in every word she speaks, in every expression on her face. The train grows ever slower, quieter. The landscape outside grows darker, the green forms blur. Helga tells you of the long, hot days in summer, when the bees work, 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 when they give their full strength, how they fly all day, gathering pollen, sucking nectar, visiting flowers, bringing everything home to their hives. How the hives buzz with life and activity and energy. How the forest air is filled with the hum of millions of bees, this deep, resonant humming that you feel in your whole body. It's like the humming of the earth itself, says Helga. And then she tells you of the quiet evenings when she sits by her hives and watches the bees return. How she sees that each individual bee is covered in pollen, full of colors, full of success, their little baskets filled. How she understands that this is a miracle, this perfect interplay of insect and forest, of flower and bee, of honey and time. The forest feeds the bees make honey. Helga cares for the bees, and all are happy in this trinity. The journey to Hackenberg is long. The train rushes on through the green hills of the Westerwald. Helga tells you of her plans. She wants to expand her beehives, wants more hives, wants to sell the honey, wants to show others how sweet and how valuable this forest honey is. She's already designed a small label with names, with history. She thinks of the future, of a life wholly devoted to honey and bees. Helga closes her eyes, exhausted but content. You notice she too is growing tired, that the long day with the bees, the long thoughts about the future, have worn her out. Her voice grows ever quieter, becomes a whisper, a dream. She tells you of the long nights when the bees sleep deep in their honeycombs, when the forest air cools after the hot day, when the streams grow louder because the world is quieter. How the stars above the Westerwald twinkle and twinkle like diamonds, like hope. How the honey in the combs slowly matures, grows thicker, grows more concentrated, becomes gold and mystery. The train grows very quiet now. You notice your own eyes growing heavy. You imagine yourself sitting with Helga at the beehives under the ancient spruces and firs. The humming of the bees slowly becomes the soundtrack of your dream. The warm forest air wraps around you like a blanket. The scent of honey, of resin, of forest blends into something new, something that draws you into a sweet, dark dream. The train rolled gently onward, and outside the world was now completely dark. Just a few lights in the distance, individual windows where other people too were coming to rest. I thought of how many people in that moment around the world were falling asleep, each in their bed, in their compartment, in their room, and how we were all part of one great, quiet movement, a movement into sleep. The rhythm of the wheels on the rails, ta-dum, 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 was like the breathing of a great friendly animal carrying us all together through the darkness, through time. And somewhere in this dark landscape, I thought, other people are sleeping now in their beds, in their houses, and the moon looks down on them, and the moon looks down on us, and everything is in its place. The fields are in their place, the forests are in their place, the rivers are in their place, and I am in my place, here in this carriage, here in this warm cradle made of wood and fabric and metal, carrying me where I must go, without needing to stay awake, without needing to do anything but trust and rest. Imagine yourself on the train from Neustadt to Pirmasens, and beside you sits a woman whose bags are full of mushroom books. Her name is Renate, and she spent the whole summer cataloguing the summer mushrooms of the Palatinate forest. August was particularly abundant this year. You can see it in her bright eyes, in the way she tells the story. It was warm, but not too dry, and it's precisely this balance that brings forth the best summer mushrooms. She shows you photographs on her phone, and you see mushrooms you've never even heard of. Fly agarics with their red caps and white spots, chanterelles in brilliant yellows, delicate wood mushrooms and deceiver mushrooms with their thin, elegant stems. Renate explains that the summer mushrooms are a world unto themselves, a kingdom with their own laws. They're not like the autumn mushrooms that come in numbers, in swarms, in explosions. The summer mushrooms are artists, loners, masters. They need warm nights and forest air that's not yet too dry, need precision in the weather. The Palatinate forest offers them exactly what they need. The mixture of spruces, firs, and hardwood, the mossy forest floor, the streams that rush everywhere and saturate the air with moisture. Everything creates the perfect climate, the perfect bed for mushroom growth. In this August, everything was perfect. The weather was like a composer writing a symphony. After months of planning and observation, with hundreds of notes, Renata has catalogued this summer like no other. The thermometers rose, rain came regularly, the sun was warm but not scorching. It was the perfect balance, and all the summer mushrooms knew it. They grew in profusion, not like autumn, but in quality, in beauty, in refinement. She sits beside you, and as the train rushes through green landscapes, she tells you of her expeditions, of her life at the boundary between science and love. How she sets out before sunrise with her basket and her identification books. The forest is still cool and moist then. Dew sits on every blade of grass, on every spiderweb. The air smells of damp moss and earth, and the deep, spicy fragrance of resin sweating black from the trees. She finds the first mushrooms after just a few minutes. It's like a game, she says, or like reading, or like listening to music. You learn to read the forest signs, the subtle signs that only those who search see them. The particular way leaves lie, a darker spot in the earth that's different from the normal color, a slight bulging beneath the moss, a minimal elevation. Your eye becomes trained over years. After a short time, you're no longer consciously searching for mushrooms. The mushrooms appear to you, as if of their own accord, everywhere. They stand out from the forest like glowing messages. Renata tells of a summer day in mid-August when she made a particularly rare find. A true chanterelle. But not just any chanterelle. One with unusual, almost perfect proportions, with distinctly elegant, finely structured ridges like organ pipes. She photographed it from several angles, measured it to the millimeter, catalogued it down to the smallest detail. It was like meeting a rare, shy person, someone you rarely encounter and never forget. She left it standing, this mushroom, because you don't take everything, but respect what you find. The train rocks steadily, soothingly, rhythmically, like a rocking chair. Outside, the forests of the Palatinate rush past, the green forms blurring into each other. You imagine walking with her through the forest, step by step, hour by hour. How your eyes slowly learn to see the mushrooms, how perception opens and changes. The hum of insects grows louder in your ears, becomes the soundtrack of your thoughts. The warm forest air becomes a blanket around you, becomes a breathing, living force. The dappled sunlight falls through the leaves and draws moving, dancing patterns on your face, on your hands, on the mossy forest floor. Renata shows you her notebook, which makes it clear it's been loved and used. She writes everything down. No single observation is lost. Date, time, precise coordinates with compass and map, soil composition, nutrient content, weather, temperature, humidity, everything. She draws small but precise sketches of the mushrooms, notes their characteristics with scientific precision. Cap shape, cap size, cap surface, cap underside, stem consistency, flesh color, taste, smell. Everything is catalogued. It's like the work of a scientist, but with the love of an artist. But Renata isn't a scientist in the classical sense. She's a mushroom observer, a lover of forest art, a person who's understood that knowledge and beauty and craft can be the same thing. She tells you that the summer mushrooms changed her life. She gave up a profession, left behind stressful work in the city where the air was grey and you couldn't see what really mattered. Now she devotes herself to the mushrooms with heart and soul. She leads workshops, shows other people how to identify summer mushrooms, their subtle differences, their special beauties. She writes for magazines and specialist publications. She's gathering material for a book about the summer mushrooms of the Palatinate Forest. A book that will be different from all other mushroom books because it's written by someone who loves the mushrooms. The train grows slower, quieter, moves to a different tempo. You notice Renata is also growing tired, that she too is tired from the intensity of gathering. Her voice becomes softer, more of a whisper. She tells you of the long midday hours in the forest when the heat becomes very intense, when the air turns thick. How she then sits beneath a large old tree and simply sits there, breathing in the forest air, listening to the stream's roar, to the birdsong. How the forest begins to breathe, to rest in that time. How the sounds become subtler when the sun grows too high and too bright. And then she tells you of special moments when she finds a particularly beautiful mushroom. How time stops, freezes in that moment. How only she and the mushroom exist. How the rest of the world disappears. How she understands that this mushroom has also been waiting for her, that it's no accident. It's an encounter, sacred in its simplicity, a moment of grace. She takes a photograph, makes notes, but doesn't always take it. Sometimes she leaves it standing so others can find it too, so the forest keeps its beauty. The train rushes through the night. Neustadt is long past. Pirmasens draws near. Renata tells you of her dreams, her hopes. She hopes more people will understand the beauty of summer mushrooms. She hopes the Palatinate forest will be protected, that the forest air will stay pure, that summer mushrooms will grow there forever. The landscape grows darker now, wears a different light. The sun leans toward the horizon and sends its last, most considered rays. The Palatinate forest becomes a dark, nearly black-green mass, where individual light rays play like gold. The train rushes on. Its sounds grow quieter, more regular, almost soothing. Renata has closed her notebook lovingly. Her eyes are closed, and her face looks relaxed. You notice your own eyes growing heavier, your thoughts blurring with the landscape outside, how you're losing yourself in this space between waking and dreaming. Slowly, so slowly, so gently, you drift away. The train becomes a rocking chair, the greatest rocking chair in the world. The wheels become the steady, soothing heartbeat of the night. You imagine walking through a warm, dark, mysterious forest. Imagine the mushrooms glowing everywhere with a gentle, phosphorescent light, like little lanterns, like little lighthouses. They show you the way. The forest is open and welcoming and safe. The forest air is warm as the breath of a loving person sitting beside you and whispering to you. The train passed through a tunnel, and for a moment everything was dark outside, only the rushing sound, only the echo of the wheels against the tunnel walls. Ta-dum, ta-dum. And then we were out again, and the night received us again, like a mother taking her child back in her arms after a brief outing. I thought how beautiful that is. Tunnel and night, and tunnel again, and night again, and onward, and eventually you don't notice anymore what's outside and what's inside, because everything flows together, because everything becomes one, because sleep is so close that you can already smell it. And somewhere in this dark landscape, I thought, other people are sleeping now in their beds, in their houses, and the moon looks down on them, and the moon looks down on us, and everything is in its place. The fields are in their place, the forests are in their place, the rivers are in their place, and I am in my place, here in this carriage, here in this warm cradle made of wood and fabric and metal, carrying me where I must go, without needing to stay awake, without needing to do anything but trust and rest. Imagine yourself in a train compartment, and outside the Thuringian forest rushes past. We're traveling from Ilmenau to Zuul, and the sun already hangs low, casting golden stripes through the dense evergreen forests. There's a woman sitting beside you, with hands stained deep red from the day's work. Her name is Margaret, and she's one of the last great blueberry gatherers of the forest. In August, when the sun blazes through the woods and the air smells of resin and ripe fruit, she ventures into the deep blueberry territories between the spruces and firs. She tells you how she sets out before sunrise. The Thuringian forest is still grey and cool when she wanders into the mossy zone with her gathering basket. Light filters down only as thin, greenish threads through the dense canopy. Here below, where the blueberry bushes grow, it's almost dark still. Her fingers know every spot where the best berries hang, plump and dark blue like the eyes of the night. Margarita explains that you can't pick the berries with your whole hand. She knows this from decades of gathering, from thousands of summer days in this forest. You have to lead your fingers slowly between the branches, keep your palm open, and let the ripe berries simply roll into it. A gentle roll, a twist, and there they lie in your hand, warm and sweet. It's like magic, she says, and laughs softly. Squeezing with your whole hand just gives juice, just waste. But this way, with the patience of a craft, the berry keeps its shape, its integrity. She shows you her fingers, and you see that the tips of her hands are as sensitive as a musician's fingertips. She's developed a feel for each individual berry, can sense which is ripe and which should wait longer. The lightest pressure, the smallest movement, and the berry releases, rolls into her open hand like a small, dark gift. The warmth of the day comes later, creeping in, then growing more intense. By 9 in the morning, when the sun is higher, when the first walkers come into the forest, the woods become a hothouse, a sauna. The air grows warm and moist, becomes thick and heavy, smells of damp earth and forest, of the intense, spicy, balsamic fragrance of resins sweating from the trees, flowing from the spruces and firs. The gentle hum of insects grows louder and louder, becomes a constant background. Bees buzz around your ears, countless bees. Butterflies flutter between the blueberry bushes, red and yellow and orange and white. But Margaret remains calm, concentrated, focused on her work. She gathers and gathers, her eyes fixed only on the berries, her fingers working automatically. She tells you of good years and bad years. Some summers bring drought, and then the berries are small and bitter. Other years it rains too much, and then come rot and mold. But this August was perfect. Warm, dry, but with enough moisture in the earth. The berries are large and sweet, and the harvest is so abundant that the gatherers can barely keep up. Marguerite has already filled 3 large baskets. You can see how heavy they are, how full of this precious harvest. She shows you her hands. The tips of her fingers are stained deep red from the day's work, from hundreds or thousands of individual touches. It never comes off completely, she says, looking at her hands the way an artist looks at their work. In summer, she's always stained like this. It's like a badge of her craft, proof of her devotion. Even water doesn't wash it off completely. It sits deeper, like ink, like a tattoo of the harvest. Midday, when the heat is most intense, when the air is heavy with moisture and sweat sits on your brow, she takes a break. She sits on a moss-covered bank in the shade and drinks water from her bottle, slowly, relishing it. The moss beneath her is cool, almost cold damp, like a natural cushion grown over thousands of years. Here below, under the dense canopy of spruces and firs, the sun doesn't reach. It's like a cave in a green dream, a refuge from the outside world. In the distance, you hear the sound of a stream bed, melodic and soothing. The water is cold and pure. She wanders over and bathes her fingers in it, and the cold water eases the pain, refreshes the deep blue staining. She sits there a long time and lets her consciousness fill with the murmur of the stream, becomes one with the water, with nature, with the moment. Marguerite tells you of special days when the harvest is particularly abundant, when there are too many blueberries, when the belly of the forest overflows. How she must then carry her baskets with help because they're so heavy. How her children and grandchildren help her carry the lighter baskets. How they all carry the precious harvest together. How the forest becomes a shared home in those moments. A place where everyone understands that life lies in this simplicity, in this repetition, in this craft. As you listen to her telling of the long, hot summer days, of the route from Ilmenau to Suhl that she takes every year by train to go home to her family, to her loved ones, you notice how your own eyes grow heavier, how your eyelids sink. The train rocks steadily, soothingly, like a great cradle. The sound of the wheels grows more and more uniform, becomes the beat of your heartbeat, becomes the rhythm of your breath. She tells you how she processes the blueberries in her kitchen. She makes jam, the most famous jam in the Thuringian forest. Every jar, every portion, is a small story of summer and forest and craft. She cooks the berries with sugar in large, gleaming pots until they bubble and boil, and the whole intensified smell of the forests comes into her house and fills every room. That's when the forest literally becomes home. Her family waits all year for this jam, counts the days. Friends and neighbors come from far away to buy it. They already have waiting lists. Some jars go to the city as gifts, as samples of a summer in the Thuringian Mountains. The train is faster now, moves to a different rhythm. The forests rush past like a green dream, like a symphony of colors and lights and textures. Margarita sits beside you, her hands still stained from the day's work, a lasting testament to her love of the harvest, of the craft, and tells you of the quiet, joyful evenings after gathering, how she then sits with her children and grandchildren, and they all listen eagerly to her stories from the forest, hungry for more. How she tells of the special places where the sweetest berries grow, of the animals she's seen, of the sounds and smells of the forest. How the forest holds them all together, connects them to each other, like a great living organism, where they're all just small parts, but important, necessary parts. That's the forest's secret, she says. The journey to Sul is long and beautiful. The train travels through darkening landscapes. Margarita shows you photographs of her garden, of her jam jars in rows, of her children eating the jam and laughing. It's a fulfilled life, she says, a life that's meaningful because it's connected to the forest and to the people she loves. The rhythm of the wheels grows louder, becomes the heartbeat of the machine. The sun sends its last rays through the treetops, golden and long and slanted, like fingers wanting to touch the earth. The forest is now even greener, more intense, because the sun hangs low and bathes everything in warm green light. Every single leaf glows, transparent, luminous from the sunlight. It's like driving through a green sea, like diving into the depths of summer night, like swimming through liquid green. Margarita closes her eyes. You notice she's also growing tired from the long day. Her voice becomes quieter, softer. She tells you of the gentle rustling of the forest at night when you're in it, how the sounds change when the sun is gone, the chirping of cicadas, the whisper of wind through the needles. The train grows very quiet now. Everything becomes dark. You can still feel the warm forest air, still smell the resin. The blueberries are now part of a dream. Margareta still sits beside you, and slowly, ever so slowly, you drift away with her into the dark, mossy forests of Thuringia, where the blueberries grow and time stands still.